Good morning. I'm Nicole Lopriori, PMA's Workforce Development Director and Executive Director of the PMA Educational Foundation. I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, Succession versus Selling, Navigating an Owner's. Today's go-to webinar is being recorded for archiving, so all participants are in listen-only mode. However, you do have the ability and are encouraged to communicate at any time by submitting questions using the question box in the right-hand control panel. We will answer as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. All registered attendees will receive a copy of the archived recording of the webinar, as well as the presentation slides. This webinar is hosted by the Precision Metalforming Association. PMA is a full-service trade association representing the $137 billion metalforming industry of North America. The association supports a network of more than 80,000 professionals from more than 800 companies. I'm pleased to introduce Troy Roberts, CEO of Beanstalk Collaborative Community Wealth, and former president and COO of AIDA Corporation. Troy also served as PMA's chair in 2019 and will moderate today's discussion with Bill Smith and Carla Aaron, owners who sold their respective companies in 2020. I'll now turn it over to Troy to introduce Bill and Carla and begin the discussion.
Thanks, Nicole. I really appreciate it. Today's discussion, we're really going to touch on succession options available to business owners, but primarily we're going to look at if you choose the sales route, which Carla and Bill did in 2020. First, Carla, as Nicole said, was a former owner of Hialeah Metal Spinning, and Bill is a former owner of Termax in Chicago. And I'd like to start with Carla. If you could just, Carla, any bio highlights? I mean, we shared a pretty comprehensive bio with the information sent previously, but just any highlights there, and especially highlight your involvement with PMA, what PMA has meant to you, and what you're doing now.
Thank you. Troy, hi, everybody. It's kind of weird. I can only see the two guys, not all of you sitting out there. So, again, my name's Carla Aaron. I am the ex-owner of Hialeah Metal Spinning. We are a small, under $10 million in sales job shop located in Miami, Florida. And we did CNC metal spinning and short run deep draw, aerospace, medical, that type of thing. So I kind of got involved. My father and my uncle started with metal spinning in Toledo, and in the 70s, they bought Hialeah Metal Spinning because they wanted to get a tan and get out of Ohio weather in the winter. And then kids grew up, and my cousins are running Toledo Metal Spinning, and I took over Hialeah Metal Spinning. So 32 years later, I am here, and I sold as of July 1st of last year, so I've been out for a year. And it's been quite a journey. PMA, I don't know all of you out there remember AMSA. I mean, that is Hialeah Metal Spinning, and Toledo Metal Spinning was a founding member of PMA. So it was ingrained in my upbringing that you will participate. And it has been the best part of my career as far as having friends, having networks. There isn't anybody I couldn't call who say, help me, I'm in trouble, I need this or whatever. And as a matter of fact, at the end of the call tomorrow, I'm going to my last Naples CEO meeting in Cleveland. So lots of family and lots of friends and lots of peers. It's been, again, the biggest part of my career. I've been transitioning for the last year. I have my buyout contract, whatever, was to remain on board for a year. And the first couple of months I was full time, and then I've gone down to 1 day a week, which is really nice. Yesterday was my last official day because the current owner, I know, was on vacation, and I filled in for him. So I actually carried my last banker's box out with my steel-toed shoes inside. So anyway, life is really interesting and really, really good. Everybody told me I was going to lose my identity, but it's amazing how you don't, at least for me. I am extraordinarily busy and doing fun, non-stressful things, like taking care of my dad, who's in Naples. I see him every week. I'm going to Glacier National Park in Maine for hiking and biking and those types of things. I've recently taken up ballroom dancing, and join the local college symphony. So it's really fun to do all of these things and to have a lot of open time. And of course, then I'm working with these two gents, trying to work with Beanstalk in the future for small companies. So thank you.
Wow. That was great. You know, there's a reason why everybody loves Karla. I think many of you know me. If you don't, I'm Bill Smith. Termax Corporation. I was a former chairman of PMA as well. But I joined PMA way back when because I had sold my CPA firm, as it turned out, I went to work for my dad for a week, ended up buying the company from him, and having now sold it 25 years later, it's worked out pretty well. But in the meantime, I realized soon after I was working for my dad that I didn't know anything about manufacturing, or I didn't know enough. I knew how to run a business because I sold my CPA firm and I knew something about money and taxes and accounting. But so I joined PMA to find a bunch of smart people, and that was really one of the best things that happened to me because I was able to go ahead. I created lifelong friends. I created just a knowledge base that was without peer. I mean, it was just wonderful. Termax was about a $3 million company when I took it over. My brother and I took it over, and we sold it. Actually, we signed papers to sell it in 2017. At that point, we were doing $95 million in sales, so it had grown quite a bit. Part of that was because we had doubled down into the automotive industry, and we were able to go ahead and do pretty well in that whole process. But then when we went to sell, the whole process of selling the company was much more, it became almost a full-time job just doing that process. And it was worth it. So I don't know exactly where we're going, but I'll restore back to Troy.
Good. Thanks, Bill. Just a brief, what PMA means to me. I came back from AIDA running their European operations in 2004 and really did not have a lot of exposure to the North American market. And so I became involved with PMA on the national level, serving on boards, thinking that it was just more of a networking type opportunity, which it was. But what I really learned, even though a lot of the customers I dealt with at AIDA were OEMs and large tier ones that were not involved in PMA, big part of the people I really liked in the automotive industry were the PMA members because they were real people with real businesses, and just really took us in. And I never stopped being involved with PMA from that point forward, and really got and then when I left AIDA and went to Qualtech Manufacturing and worked for a sub $10 million company, I realized how difficult it is for small businesses to really survive today. It's tough, and especially when you're working in automotive supply chain or aerospace or whatever. It's a tough gig, and that really became the impetus of what the idea of Beanstalk Collaborative Community Wealth. Our mission really is to make sure these businesses stay in their community wherever they can. That's what our ultimate goal is, and that's why we're partnering with PMA, because that's PMA's goal too. They want to have members to serve. If there are no members, there's no one to serve. But so we spend time, Beanstalk spends time doing stuff like this. We want to provoke membership to start thinking about succession. It's a big, I know it's always, being part of PMA, it's always on the top three of what the concerns are, networking groups or whatever. So a lot of people talk about it, but I'm not sure everyone actually takes steps to really figure out what they want to do. So, the worst exit option that you can have is an orderly liquidation. We don't want that to be the option, the only option of choice. So we're doing things like this to get people to start thinking, and Beanstalk may be a solution for some companies. Our model is a buy, build, and hold model, which is very different than traditional private equity. So our goal is to keep these businesses in their communities not only surviving but growing. So to make that happen, we have to meet the owners where they're at and understand what their financial aspirations are, but the owner profile, they really have to value the legacy they've built with their business. They have to value their employees, and they have to value their community, because working with us is a process, because we have to understand what the owner needs, but we really also need to understand what the business needs and what we need to invest in people, process, and CapEx. Because it is a buy, build, and hold model. We're not selling. We have to make sure we've got the funds earmarked to make these businesses not only sustain but grow. And then employee engagement is a big part of what we do. We really want the employees to understand the business, and that as the business improves, also we want the employees. Oh, thank you, sir. We also want the employees to participate in the success that we're having. And if we do those things well, then the community is what really is going to benefit, because having manufacturing in a community really brings a lot of benefits to that community. So that's all I'll say about Beanstalk and what we're about and what we're doing. Next slide, please. So as we said, there are different succession options. There's internal succession, so succeeding to family, management buyouts, or ESOPs. Those are deep subjects, and we would like to have future discussions going in depth about those things. But what we're going to talk about today more is when you've made the decision to sell your business, and you could, if you're large enough and interested enough, private equity may be an option for you. Strategic buyers are also a very good option for businesses in the size range that we're talking about. And then the last option, which already touched on, we hope nobody we don't want to see people have to select this option, because that means the business stops generally and where it's operating. So that's not a good one in our view. But let's talk about selling the business. Next slide, please. What we've done is we've put together here just a sort of a bullet point list. If you have decided to sell your business, which Karla and Bill did, the first point is the decision has been, I want to sell that business, and like that's really easy to come to that conclusion. And I think our audience may be very interested to learn, I guess two things. When did you decide to sell, and what prompted you to make the decision, or say to move on, whatever that looked like? And then secondly, what kind of analysis did you go through that said selling the business is the best option for me? And I think you two are the perfect people to talk to, because you're at sort of the two ends of the spectrum of PMA membership. You've got the sub $10 million sales company, and then you've got one that's sort of broken out of that, and they're approaching 100 million in sales. And it's just very curious to understand what options were available and how all that worked in determining what you did. So Karla, if you could start us out on what your thought process was, that would be really interesting.
Well, Hialeah is a really small company, so there's not a lot of resources. And for me, there's three things that said it's time. I want more personal time. As a small company, you were always on. It was not employees. It was a sales. It was a quality issue. It was a regulation. You were just on for a long, long time. And constant. So there was not enough personal time. I couldn't play tennis in the morning. Going to see my dad was running over on the weekends and back, your normal vacation. I just wanted more time. And I've been wanting that for many years. I'd say, 10 years, then in 5 years, I was like, oh my goodness, I really need some more personal time. But two other things came into play that really said I'm ready to sell. One is, I'm going to call it bureaucracy and burnout. The two B's. We all deal with OSHA, we're all dealing with ISO and AS and all, COVID now. The NIST 800-171 regulation, cybersecurity, kind of just put me over the top. It's like, are you kidding me? All these things, I know nothing about it. It's going to cost me money. It's just another level. And at some point, again, after 30 years, I just didn't have the motivation or the energy to carry on another thing. So that was the second part. The third part is, I'm going to call timing in my life. I'm 60 years old. I can still move. I want to go do things. I want to have some fun. And I've seen so many people, something happens either physically or with their family members or whatever, and that window closes. So the trifecta for me was personal time, the right time in my life, and then the burnout factor. And those three said, okay, I am, despite all of the love and the obligation and the family and all that, it's time to sell.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, and my decision was, we all get tired. I love what I do. I love business, but I just got tired of the same old rat race. It's nice to be now a little bit different than Karla. I still love business. I don't want to be there every day. I want to go ahead and work until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, then go golfing or I still run. So many of you know I used to do a lot of marathons or half marathons. So it's just, life is different when you don't have all of those responsibilities. Now my decision to sell, at first I had to make sure that I had enough money. I'm still paying for my father for his lifestyle. I'm paying for my brother. I have to make sure that there's enough money for him to survive, and myself and family. I mean, so even though all my kids are growing and I've got like 18 grandkids, but I still have to make sure that my wife's horse farm is still being covered. And so the point is that my first decision to sell is, can I make enough out of it to make ends meet going forward? And I've never not had a job. So it was kind of an interesting transition for me just to figure out, this is weird stuff. I'm not sure if I know if I'm comfortable. And I knew I was not going to sit and watch Fox News all day long. So anyway, that's where we are with that.
Well, let me ask one more question before we move on, and related to this subject. So, looking at sort of two ends of the spectrum, like we said, what options did you have available, in succeeding the business, and then, and you obviously you chose to sell the business, and what did you have to go through to make that, to even make that option available for you, and within that option, why did you choose who you did to sell to?
Bill, go ahead.
Well, I'll start that one. I had lots of options. The thing is, as a company gets larger, then what happens? There's a lot more people that are looking to try to roll you into their company or use you as a platform to roll other companies into you. And so private equity, we had a lot of offers or a lot of people that were looking at us. I was determined to protect my employees and to protect the culture and the company that we'd created. We could have gotten more money in some other situation, but there was more to it than that. We ended up looking at all sorts of different outside sources. I have no children that wanted to be part of the company. So that was the first decision step. The second was, is there enough business going forward to look interesting? Because you have to have something that is unique to you. We had patents, we had specific stuff that we had going on, but we made it a point to keep growing within the areas that we had. And a buyer wants potential. It's like buying a stock on the stock market. The reason it trades for more than its intrinsic value, the value of the assets, is because of the potential of growing. Well, that's really what happens in these situations. You have to have something that somebody wants to buy. I used to say it's only worth as much as some schmuck is willing to pay for it, and that's really true. But I had to figure that out. Now, I knew from day one that I wasn't just going to sell the assets, because it would be 50%, 40% of what you could get if you sell it as an ongoing concern. Most people, they want to buy something that it's a multiple of sales. So, multiple of profits. So there's a lot of fancy words, but it's, again, looking at the future. They're looking to grow it into something else. So, or to grow more. We'll leave it at that. And that's I had it a little easier because it was bigger. I could rely on my people, more people, to run the day-to-day business, while I was spending probably 80 hours, well, I'm exaggerating, probably 40 to 50 hours a week just on selling the company. I mean, getting it ready to work it was a lot of work. And I knew that going into it because of my business background, or my accounting background.
So why did you select the buyer that you ended up selling to? Was their profile that made you select them over, say, private equity?
It was a strategic buyer, and strategic buyers means that they wanted to expand their present business, that were in the same industry we were, or a similar industry. In our case, this was a French company that also, I should tell you, we make automotive fasteners that hold cars together. Not very exciting, except that, we did pretty well. Our profits were really good. And the company that bought us, they were a European company, that French. They wanted to go ahead and have a bigger presence in the North American market. Well, that was great for us. So it was a prime person to build it. And just as it turns out, I'll brag now because that's what I do. Our business is their jewel now. I mean, it's worked out really well for them. And they were good buyers for us too. I mean, just on an overall basis, I hear about the horror stories. Sometimes they really work out. And I think ours did work out pretty well.
Good. Well, Karla, what about what options did you have, and how did you end up where you were at with how you sold?
I wasn't fighting them off at the door. I'll tell you that. I think for a small company, it's really challenging. I look at your list of 9 things here, Troy, and for me, the most difficult thing was finding the right buyer. I had talked to brokers. They pretty much hung up the phone. I'm too small. There's not enough money. It's not worth their time. And the amount of money that they would want if they did it was ridiculous. I had some private equity folks look at me, but again, I didn't like the traditional PE model where they were going to come in and highly leverage the business, and not what I was looking for. I did have some peers. Keeping the word quiet on the street is tough. You can get it out at the same time. But I had some peers, but it didn't work out. There wasn't a good match. I'm in Miami. It's kind of a difficult location as far as other spinning companies. And so I finally ended up selling internally. So I sold to my number 2. And why I went with that is because of I'm going to call it the continuation of the business. It's the same benefits. It's the same 401k. It's the same door that they clock in. It's the same equipment. It's the same people. It's the same policies. And, the same value system that was the culture that was instilled is carrying on. So it was very important to me. I feel an extreme loyalty, obligation, responsibility for the employees. And, you know, I'm blessed to have the life I have for all the efforts and all the work they've done over the years and we did as a team. So I didn't want them to lose out in this, for this to be a life-altering event for them. So it was very important to me that the buyer that came in would continue the business and hopefully grow it and give them even more opportunities than I was able to. So finding the right buyer was really, really tough. It took years.
It took me years too.
Great. Yeah.
It's a long process. If you think that you're going to sell and you're going to be out in 6 months, it is not the process.
Yeah. Well, you know, the decision part, which was hard, may have been the easiest part on the list here when it's all said and done, because, you know, as you both alluded to, it's a full-time job trying to sell your business once you make that decision. You know, this next step here, and we're saying 6 to 12 months. It's probably you know, depending on the situation, it could be a lot longer than that too. If you have failed starts and pauses in the process and things like that.
Well, here's the point is that when you make a decision to sell, that it's almost a psychological decision at that point, because you're saying, I'm going to walk away, or I'm going to finish up, or I'm going to bring on a partner that does it with me. And that's kind of that starts the clock running. And so there could be other steps even prior to that, like getting it ready to sell. So
yeah. Well, so that decision is made. You know, we say here, we think the next thing you have to have your team in place, just like you have your team in place to run your business. Now you have to put a team in place to sell your business. We call it selecting guides. What are we really talking about here? Who is your team on that?
I'll go first. Okay. Again, thank you, PMA. I asked around and got some references. My normal legal guy was what I consider a normal legal guy, you know, trusts and wills and a little buyback, and, you know, nothing about all these legal documents of purchase agreements and, you know, I think there were like 30 legal documents going through. Similarly, my accountant, you know, does my books and does my taxes. He's not familiar with all of the ins and outs of selling. You know, I did a stock sale with a 338H election, which is asset underneath, and there, you know, you've got to have a company on top of the company that buys the company. I mean, so I knew more about accounting and legal work than I really wanted to. It's very interesting though. But I had a lawyer who happened to actually be an accountant out of Milwaukee who helped me through this, and I worked with him for probably 2 years as I was signing NDAs and doing some peekaboos with some other people until we came to the final one.
NDA means non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah. I will say that I have an internal sale. The internal sale took 18 months to complete. Yeah. It was a really long process because the buyer and I were new to the process. So everything was long.
Yeah. How about you, Bill? Who are your go-to guys?
Well, I realized real quickly that my normal accountant and lawyer also were not adequate. If you try to use them, the problem, or what I realized after talking to them, is that they might have some familiarity, but there's people that specialize in this stuff. And that's really what you need, is the guys that are working through it. Now, I had my CFO at my company had also been through 2 or 3 different mergers and acquisitions in his prior years. So it helped to get everything together. But in guiding us, we had a lawyer, we had our PMA cohorts, and then eventually we had some outside accountants that were involved. I used to think I knew more than they do. I don't know diddly squat, but it was fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fun to learn something else. So.
Yeah, I know from Beanstalk's perspective, we say this is very important, because if you're not committed to having these people on your team, then we don't think you're really committed to selling, because you don't really understand the process you're going to go through. And that's sort of a requirement for us. That do you have the right guides? We've already had some difficulties where we've explained to potential sellers that, just by talking with the other side, they're not the right people, and they're not going to get us over the finish line. And but they continue on, and then it falls apart on their side at the end, and they had some bad parting of ways with existing people they've had, because that's not their skill set to advise on those things. But assuming you do have the right guys, and you're putting that together, the next hurdle is really, we put down here, attaining a realistic valuation of the business. We do a pretty detailed conversation on business valuation, because a lot of people don't understand how businesses like these are valued. And did you all find it? How did you go to that process to say, well, I want to sell, but as you said, Bill, am I going to be able to get enough money for this to satisfy my needs? How did you all, kick the tires and find out what you thought the business would sell for?
Karla, you want to tack that first?
Again, an internal sale is a little different. The buyer knows everything that's going on there. Everybody knows the multipliers that on the market as it goes up and down through normal business cycles. And I knew what the multiplier should be. I knew what my adjusted EBITDA should be, so I had a number in mind. That's the number we negotiated off of. And when the bank who financed required a outside valuation through their company, and it came back in significantly higher than the number I agreed to. So, the valuation process was pretty much an internal negotiation between the two of us. Working capital always coming in as a big issue that has to be worked through. But again, Bill and I probably represent very different ends of the spectrum. So, Bill?
Yeah. I found, well, when you get a value for a building, a building itself, what happens is part of it is the income approach, which is really what that's the income that businesses generate, or that building is generating in rents, or the net profits that it works through. And most businesses work that way. It's the market value, that's what other people are paying for similar sort of things. And when you hear that the big Apple bought this one, and Google bought this, and all that, a lot of that has to do with they're trying to make something more out of that company. It's worth oftentimes a whole lot more than reality. Or they're paying a lot more than some reality here. I knew that it was a multiple of its earnings. That's the normal part. Or it's a starting point is the value of the assets, the underlying assets themselves, plus some proportion for earnings. Because if you're not making money, if you're losing money, it's harder. Frankly, people don't want to buy a loser. Why would you want to give $1 million for something that is going to cost more money every year? So I had to find somebody that was going to first give me enough money to survive, and second, that I felt like was really understood what the value of that business was. So, or that it had more ongoing value. And so I don't know if that helps or not.
Well, for the businesses and the size of a PMA member, it's definitely going to be a multi, as you all said, it's going to be, I think the going concern is going to provide the greatest value. Assuming you've got an EBITDA with a multiple that makes sense, and you don't have a lot of leverage on the business. So just like a home, you can have the business worth X, but if you've got a lot of debt on the business, the equity value, you have to deduct the debt against the value of the business, and that's what you walk away with. And that's where I think some people, if they don't understand that, they get to the process, they don't understand that early enough, then they really, the timing of when they think they want to sell versus when they can afford to sell,
right?
They don't match up, and then they're trapped. And they end up staying a lot longer. And that's why we're encouraging people to, get educated on that, understand how your business is going to be looked at, what is the right multiple, what is EBITDA, what does that mean, and what does adjusted EBITDA mean if you're running a lot of other things through the business, so that you can make a realistic case. This is what the cash flows would be on a going forward basis, the earnings on a going forward basis. But if you get past that step and you say, okay, I think I can sell the business and have enough equity value to walk away and do the things I want to do with my life, now you've got to market the business. And this, Karla, you've already explained, because you did the internal sale, that wasn't something you had to necessarily go through. But when we look at businesses, there's a lot of information that a potential buyer needs to have provided to them to just even evaluate the business. And the onus is on the seller to put all that together. Bill, you went with a third party.
Right.
What were the kind of things you each had to give to do what you did? What kind of preparation did you have to make?
Well, I didn't have to do it because I had some knowledge of this in the past, but most people will have to have the broker. If you have an outside broker, they'll do a lot of that work for you, or at least they'll help you put it together, because that should be their job, is to make sure that you get those offering materials. What the goal is, to make this so you look attractive. You're trying you're fishing, so you're trying to get this fish to bite your hook. And like I said, I did it myself, and I probably messed up some, but it's all right. It worked out.
Yeah, Troy. Even though I sold internally, I mean, a lot of people. I did talk to a number of people, so I did have to put a book together. So coming up with 4 or 5 page documents summarizing financials, staffing, equipment, markets, all that type of thing, and making sure your wording is right, and then all the numbers behind it. It's a lot of work.
It is.
All right. So then you have the offering materials, and you mentioned how do you get the word out without getting the word out to the wrong folks, and get enough bites so that you can get you have some. It's always best to have something to choose from if you can. We all like to have choice, and like you said, it's not always about money, but money's very, very important, and you have to look at the whole picture. So how did you even before you decided internally, Karla, to sell internally, you did entertain other ideas. So how is that business marketed around?
It's really tough. Like with all relationships, you've got some folks that you are very close with, that you are have a high degree of trust. So I put the word out. I think quietly to PMA, NAM, other. I said on a lot of boards, just to kind of feel out and see who's out there. Of course, you're signing NDAs with PE firms and other things like that, but in my mind, I didn't want all this turmoil happening at my business as far as employees being worried about their livelihood. Maybe they want to, leave. I didn't want customers not placing new orders or new business with me because they are worried about the future of the company. So trying to find a buyer quietly is, I think, very, very challenging. You've got to be very selective. I was paranoid, quite honestly paranoid about it. So.
Well, that's often why you do use a broker, because the brokers can make that look like an independent third person, or that they have this business that might be for sale. And yeah, it's a way to remove yourself from that.
Yeah, but if you're a
Yeah,
spinning company in Southeast U.S., it's me. So
I know. Yeah.
It's kind of hard to camouflage some of us. So.
True. And we would have had a tough time camouflaging ourselves too, in that same way. And now the big thing is your employees. You really don't want them to think that employees they worry that they're going to lose their job, or that somehow everything's going to change. And that really is the big kicker. You've got to go ahead and do it outside of hours. Now that we look at through Beanstalk, we look at buying things. We oftentimes don't. We have to deal with the owners and stuff outside of normal business hours. So on Saturdays or on evenings, or you don't want them to walk away either, because that's part of the ongoing business. You need their help.
Well, and we do that. We empathize with them because we've all had businesses, right? We understand that anxiety because it just creates a lot of. I mean, obviously you have to let your employees know at the right time, but the right time is when you know it's going to happen, and so it's difficult to get there,
Right.
Well, so let's say you find potential buyers, and hopefully you've got interest from multiple potential buyers, and the process is they'll issue either an indication of interest or hopefully a letter of interest, which just for the folks out there, an LOI, it really is defining the offer and some of the major conditions in return for an exclusivity period of generally 90 to can be 90 to 180 days depending on the size of the company, for that company to have exclusive rights to access to the seller and to see if everything is through the due diligence process, that it comes out to where they would honor that offer they had in the LOI. So if you had multiple LOIs presented to you, what were the things that you were looking at? What was important to you in that process?
Well, for us, it's maintaining the culture of our company. So that was our number one issue there. 2 is going to be making sure there's enough dollars there that are going to cover our needs, and so letters of intent are really kind of the initial salvo. It's like a car in an auto lot. That's the price, the sticker price. That's what I'm trying to say. But they're the ones that are creating it for you. You have a one in mind, but they're the ones offering. So a letter of intent is at that point that they're making, that they have an intent to make an offer for you. It's limiting it for them a period. So it's not until after that actually gets created it's after that point that the real negotiations start. So, and that's why you have multiple. Good.
Anything to add there, Karla, from your perspective?
The LOI is a very, very broad stroke. This amount of money, this kind of a sale. Very broad, and then you go in behind it to back it all up afterwards if you proceed.
And just so you know, the dollars will change dramatically, or they can after that period of time. Because remember, this guy hasn't seen much. He doesn't know what you got, right? And he has to see. Sometimes it's more. In our case, it actually is more than what our original letter of intent was. But oftentimes it's less too. So.
Yeah, one of our other partner, he came from private equity, and if big private equity is an option for you, it's a lot of that is, there is no, with an LOI, just realize there is no commitment for the buyer to buy.
Right.
So they can really say anything, and then they lock you up in this 90 to 180 day due diligence torture period, and try to beat you down and beat the price down. And that's what they do a lot of times. So you got to be really prepared for that and know that can happen. And then and I think item 8 here is the toughest. This is the grueling part of the process, because you're trying to run your business. That's your day job, and then you've got the due diligence process, which you've got your guys and your team to help. But tell us what that process was like for you all, the due diligence process.
For me, it was extensive because, granted, I had an internal buyer, but still putting all that information in a format that an internal buyer would understand. It's, you're backing out numbers, you're putting numbers in, you're forecasting numbers, you're looking at wages, you're looking at profiles and customers and what percentage of business and trends. And I mean, it's tremendous. And I just, Troy, to go back for a second, I mean, I had a PE buyer with an LOI in place, and I was just about to tell everybody, and they came back and said, you know what? We're not going to offer you as much. We're downloading we're backing out as far as they're going to offer less. And it's like, okay, we're done. You didn't, and so I start over again. So yeah, the LOI is just the first dance. You are definitely not married. So, but the due diligence, they want a lot of information, and depending on how clean your books are, if your books are really clean, it's not too bad. But again, it's a lot of time, and you're not familiar with it. It's all sorts of information that you're gathering that you've not gathered in that way before. It's a different format.
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, due diligence in general, I mean, they're just trying to make sure that what you represented is the truth. And so they have to look at things like contracts. They have to look at who your customers are. At some point, they'll either talk to the customers or suppliers. They have to go ahead and make sure that your employees aren't looking elsewhere. And a lot of it is smoke and mirrors. I mean, what I mean is that prior to that point, at that point, you're trying to cut through the clutter to find out if that business, as a buyer now, if that business is worthwhile, or if it's going to fit what you want. In that same way, from a seller standpoint, you've got to tell them that, that's what they're going to do. I'm not going to spend millions of dollars on something that I don't know what it is. And if I don't think I can get a return, why would I do it? I've got a lot of places I can go put it in a CD. So.
Yeah. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left, so I think we should open it up. Nicole, is there any questions that came in that people would like us to address?
Yes, I've got a couple of questions here. The first is, were the legal and tax guides you selected for the sales transaction the same that you used for day-to-day business operations?
No, definitely not. Though they could have been. They are sometimes, but accountants and attorneys, they have specialties. And if it's a big enough accounting firm, they might have people within their firm that do it, but almost never does that work out well.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, thank you. The next question we have is, who did you turn to for your business evaluation?
Well, in our case, I had done a lot of that before, because prior to this life, I was in, it was called litigation support. So there's a lot of things involved in that, but the brokers do that sort of things for you. If you use a broker, outside broker firm, Beanstalk, we do it ourselves for people. We have a whole criteria that we use for purchasing on things. You'll have an idea of what you need anyway. So all you're trying to do is to backfill what that is.
Yeah. So, I had a number that I needed, and what was interesting to me is, as I mentioned before, we kind of negotiated the number ahead, and then the bank is the one who selected the valuation. And if anybody wants, there's an email, you can send me an email and I'll tell you who the bank used. I was astounded. I got a 60-page document back, and
$5,000.
I talked to the guy on the phone, the evaluator, for, I don't know, 15 minutes. That's it. But they're looking at your trends. They're comparing you. They're putting you with other comps. They're asking how much risk is out there, how niche your business is. I mean, I was shocked at all and like Bill said, they went at the valuation like 3 different ways. The multiplier way, they just backed into it, and they said, okay, here's the number. It was very interesting. But again, I did not actually select the valuation or have it done before I actually agreed.
Well, very quickly, we also had at one point I set up it's called a GRAT, Guaranteed Remainder Interest Trust, but for my children, so they owned part of it, and as the value of the company grew, they ended up getting some of the ownership or at least the money from the ownership. And the reason I did that, or what it required, is I had to get an outside valuation. And there's economists that do that. That actually is how economists really make a living more than anything else. But banks can get you in touch with those kind of people. The average cost is between $5,000 and $10,000 for that. At least that's what we paid. There are outside people do it. $3,000. Okay.
Small company.
Okay.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Was the insurance and employee benefits 401k part of the due diligence period?
I had a blah, blah, blah. Stock sale, I wanted a stock sale because all of the contracts remained in place. With the suppliers, with the customers, with the 401k, you wouldn't believe the number of contracts you have on a normal business going forward. The uniforms, it's wild. So we did a stock, the bank account stays in place, everything in a stock sale, but when we put the 338H election on, it actually allowed the buyer to step up the basis on the assets. See, look, I think I know what I'm talking about.
I was going to say, man, you're good.
Anyway, I've lost my train of thought, but I've lost it. I'm losing it.
So they were asked about the 401k. The thing was, everything stayed in place. Everything stayed in place.
We even kept the same payroll companies, even the account that they pulled the money on, or biweekly payroll. Nothing changed. It made it really, really, really easy.
Yeah. It's quite different in an asset sale.
Well, yes.
You want to cover that? You
asset
did an
sales.
Sale,
remember,
right?
you're selling all of the individual assets within the company, and what is more than that is goodwill. So that goodwill is kind of the what covers everything else. But asset sales, then, if you sell it on an asset sale, you have to get a brand new lease. If you have just a lot of individual things that change, and that will require new documents, new negotiations with your landlords, with different people. So from an owner's standpoint, stock sales are better. From a buyer's standpoint, an asset sale is better. So it's just, they're trying to merge some of those things through, but you need to know that that's part of the negotiation process.
Yeah. Yes, I mean,
so with an asset sale, specifically to that question, just let me interrupt there. You would have to come in as the buyer. You'd have to set up your own healthcare program, your own 401k program, all those things. You have to have those ready so that when you take control of the company, that you're the old co, and you're coming into new co, the employees coming in, that you're ready to receive them and operate accordingly.
Very helpful. Thank you. So the other question that we have is, did you have other shareholders when you sold? And if you did, what was the reaction to your decision to sell?
No, I'm 100%.
Well, I had my brother, and you that know me know that we weren't always on the same page. But the problem is, how do I say this? All shareholders, or at least the majority of them, have to be together in the sale. You've got to decide that you're going to do it together, because nobody's going to want to get in bed with somebody else unless that person is on the team. So it's not worth it. When you make the decision to sell, it's got to be a joint decision. That's what I'm saying. And they can, if they're not working with you, they'll work against you. That's just how it works.
Yeah.
Okay, and we have one last question, and that is, can you share the approximate financial structure that brokers are looking for to charge for selling your company?
Oh,
wow.
Right, that's right up your alley.
We've got a pretty extensive list of brokers that we've developed a pipeline through, and I will say it's all over the board. But it seems like on the smaller companies, we've seen some really crazy people signing things. Like we had one where we found out that the broker's going to get 10%, which is unheard of. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, it's 10% of the transaction price. So that's the key.
That's a big number. So if it's a $5 million sale, they're walking away with $500,000 for putting together a SIM and all this documentation, and that's a big bite. It should be. My son is an investment banker. He sells tech companies, for many millions, tens of millions of dollars, and they're in the if they're getting 1%, they're happy. And it's bigger numbers, but anyway, it should generally be a sliding scale where you see that the more it could be a broker has to get enough money to cover their fixed costs for doing this thing. So it could be say 5% on the first million, and then 4% on the next million, 3% on the next million, so that the weighted average number is depending on how big it is, could be from 2 to 4% or something like that. But it's definitely the question you need to ask, because that comes off the top whenever
it comes out of your pocket. You as the seller.
Yeah,
you're the one paying that. Right. Exactly. Sorry.
I looked at a broker, and they wanted a fee out of the transaction, and then if it didn't come through like in 6 months, they were going to increase the fee because it was more overhead, and then I was exclusive, or I had a year after trailing that I couldn't sell it. I mean, it's like, really? It was not fun.
Well, I know that you all have other places that you need to be relatively soon. So I want to thank you all, Troy, Karla, and Bill, for taking the time to join us today and sharing your expertise and what you've learned while you were selling your businesses. We do have one further question, but I'll send that and allow you guys to respond, and then we'll share it back to the asker. So since there are no further questions in the queue, this will conclude our webinar. A follow-up email will be sent to you that includes a link to the archive recording of the webinar and the presentation slides. PMA has many webinars scheduled during the next few months. Please visit pma.org for details and to register. Our webinar is now over, and you may close out of your browser. Have a good rest of the day, and thanks again.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thanks.